So good morning, everybody, or good afternoon or good evening, depending where you're joining us from. It's certainly early morning here in Amsterdam. So we are going to slowly start and let people drop into our presentation today. Welcome on behalf of Plan International and our partners today. We're really glad that you've joined our session on how gender-transformative WASH can help build resilience to climate change and environmental degradation. My name is Garance Reus. I'm the Director of Plan International in the Netherlands, and I'm joined today by four very interesting speakers, and I'll briefly introduce those speakers to you first. But before I forget, let me just remind you that you can switch on a live transcription if English is not your preferred language. It might be easier to follow this presentation today. It's a caption that you can switch on, I think, at the top of your screen. Again, four very interesting speakers today. First, we will start with Plan's Senior WASH Sanitation and Hygiene Program Manager, Marcia Singeling. She's an expert on gender-transformative WASH and menstrual hygiene. And then Irene Dankelman, who's been working for years and years in the area of climate change, gender, environment, and sustainable development. Just to do her CV justice would take the whole hour, so I'll stop there. My colleague from Plan, Jess Cook, has worked at Plan International for 5 years on climate and resilience programming and influencing, and she really works across our organization on climate policy processes, and especially on enabling youth engagement in these processes. And finally, from Ethiopia, Fisea Atali, our WASH expert in Plan's Ethiopia office, will share his expertise and experience on WASH and climate from an Ethiopian perspective. But before we kick off, let me please share briefly some personal thoughts on our topic today. I think we all know that the inequalities and discrimination that children, especially girls, already face are deepened by climate change. Climate change is affecting access to water, to sanitation, to hygiene services, and really disrupting even the most basic community services. And the particular vulnerability of especially adolescent girls to climate change, due to the combined effects of age and gender discrimination, has really serious implications for many of their rights. Now, I'm personally no expert on the topic of climate and gender myself, but I'm always really astonished by how mundane the facts about gender inequality are, and how easily basic services combined with real meaningful participation could bring about that change. For instance, in Kenya, fetching water can use up to 85% of a woman's daily energy intake. And in times of drought, women spend up to 8 hours a day in search of water. That's a whole working day just to find water, which is a basic human right and a necessity. So that's just one simple example of how women are disproportionately affected by climate change. And in this case, of course, a fairer distribution of tasks would be a major step towards gender equality. In Mozambique, child marriage is expected to increase by 16% in areas suffering from drought. So these are just two examples of the serious setbacks for girls as a result of climate change. Yet, girls and young women are hardly involved in decision-making around WASH or conservation or climate policy. Only 4% of the World Energy Committee chairs are women. So education and participation are key factors in combating climate change and are really central to Plan's approach in the climate crisis too. And sometimes that simply means ensuring that girls have a say in what kind of facilities they have at school, so that they don't have to skip class during their periods. So again, basic services and facilities combined with meaningful participation of girls and young women. So let me stop here and hand over after a short video to my colleague Gerdien, who will now lead you through the rest of our program. And again, thank you very much for joining.
In many countries, girls and women are the ones taking care of the household, fetching water, and feeding the children. They are often also forced to stay at home from school when they have their period. This prevents them from fully participating in their society or investing in their own development. These water, sanitation, and hygiene roles are based upon underlying discriminatory gender norms. Due to these norms, the absence of WASH facilities and services is mostly felt by women and girls. This also means that how we implement WASH programs can contribute to shifting discriminatory gender norms and tackling inequitable power relations in households and communities. When it comes to WASH, girls and women not only know what is best for themselves, but also what their communities need. The involvement of women and girls in WASH decision-making is crucial. To make this possible, it's important for men and women to feel empowered to negotiate with each other and share household and community tasks. Plan International's WASH programs seek to be inclusive and gender transformative to ensure that WASH facilities and services cater to the specific needs of women and girls. Throughout our WASH programs, we are working on 4 areas of change. 1. Improving the division of the WASH workload within the household. For example, we discussed the role of men within the household and how to help with cleaning and feeding the children. 2. Improving the level of participation of women and girls in WASH activities in their community. Girls and women learn how to stand up and participate actively in community WASH decision-making. Plan also works with community and school structures to ensure that equal representation of women, girls, boys and men is guaranteed and appreciated. 3. Improving shared WASH decision-making in the household. Through community dialogues, we aim to increase the appreciation of the voices of women and girls within the household and the community. 4. Improving the level of women's leadership in the community around WASH. Through confidence and leadership trainings, girls and women are equipped to take on leadership roles. Men and boys are also involved to become active champions of change to support women and girls in leadership roles. WASH is an important vehicle that can contribute to the transformation of gender relations and promote other forms of inclusion. Access to WASH services will not only improve living conditions, it will also create an opportunity to tackle the root causes of inequitable power relations and will create an environment that enables girls and boys to thrive better in life. In many countries,
Okay, thanks for showing this. Good morning all. My name is Gerdien Segers from Plan Netherlands, the WASH team, and I'm your facilitator. I would ask you if you have any questions, you can put them in the portable chat box. And during our panel session, the panelists will answer all your questions. And now I would like to give the floor to my colleague, Masha. Masha, please.
Thanks, Gerdien. Well, as the animation already illustrates, Plan International is using a gender-transformative WASH approach because we believe that access to WASH services and information are crucial to improve the living conditions for women and girls, but also on how you implement WASH activities. It can also improve the position of women and girls in society. This does not happen automatically. And too often we see that in WASH activities, women and girls are involved, even in decision-making, but their workload actually increases because the WASH workload is not divided equally. That means they have insufficient time actually to really be involved in the WASH decision-making. So by ensuring men and boys are also empowered and encouraged to take up part of the WASH workload, we can ensure that women and girls have more time to be involved with WASH decision-making, and actually gender transformation can take place. These are not easy processes, they take very long, but it does happen if you dedicate your time within programs to facilitate this, and we have seen this happen already. So we're really happy about that. The context in which Plan International is implementing its programs is changing rapidly due to climate change. And like Aaron's mentioned, it is already having a big impact on the WASH services in a negative way. Unequal access to WASH services is growing, and the impact for girls and women on the absence of WASH services is also growing as such. And the examples that Garon's already was mentioning, we are seeing that already on the ground. Before, it was already a challenge for women and girls to go to school because they had to fetch water. Now the distances are becoming much longer. So more girls are taken out of school and simply don't have the time to do that. Or due to drought, household incomes are depleting and girls are married off more often than before. So to ensure all children and young people attain and sustain access to WASH services, despite climate change, Plan International works on a climate resilient, gender transformative WASH solution. So how does this look like? Together with communities, we focus on developing and promoting climate smart WASH solutions. And you can think about an elevator pit latrine, for instance, in areas that are prone to flooding, or the use of rainwater harvesting in water scarce areas. And through gender training and community dialogue, we stimulate gender transformation. So the WASH workload is more equally distributed, and the WASH workload is definitely increasing because of climate change. So this is even more important than before. And through climate education, we aim to provide communities with tools that can enhance their climate resilience and how they can work with their environment to reduce the impact of climate change. Plan also empowers girls, together with boys, to become active leaders of change and to help them to claim their role in the climate debate, the decision-making processes within their community, within their district, at national, but also at the international fora. Climate rights are girls' rights, and as such, they must be explicitly recognized in national climate strategies. And therefore, we also work very closely with national governments and civil society organizations to ensure that they are. So more and more, Plan is also partnering up with nature conservation organizations that can support us in this work, not just on WASH, but also on pre-WASH, as we call it. So to ensure that the WASH systems are resilient and sustained to support WASH activities in the long run. So we cannot do this alone. So climate change is the biggest intergenerational challenge we are facing today, and we need everybody on board to solve this. So it's even more important that women and girls can meaningfully participate in climate decisions and climate actions. As such, we believe a climate resilient, gender transformative WASH approach is needed to make this a reality. Well, thanks everybody. Back to Gerdien.
Thank you, Masha. Very interesting speech. Now I would like to introduce Irene Dankerman. Irene is director from Erdana Consultancy and has a lot of experience. So, Irene, the floor is yours.
Hello, good morning, or good evening, and or afternoon, everybody, all over the place, all over our planet. Let me start with sharing my observation that this World Water Week already more than 12 sessions took place in which gender transformative WASH played a central role. So there is attention to it, and many valuable lessons can be learned from what has been shared already. The call for action of UNESCO and many partners accelerating gender equality in the water domain underlines that. So let me, as an ecologist, try to add some other perspective to this topic. The role of WASH in the context of resilience building to climate change and environmental degradation. According to Johan Rockström from the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, during the opening session of the World Water Week, We are close to or already surpassing the ecological tipping points, the points of no return. The evidence is there that we are entering a new epoch, the Anthropocene, that area that has been completely shaped by our human interventions. Just a quick view at the recent IPCC report underlines that. And this will result in, it has been said already this morning, in more inequalities, but also more instability and conflicts worldwide. And fresh water, in all its forms and appearances, is a determining element in that context. So climate change and fresh water or salty water, they are very much manifesting those climatic changes. So there is an urgent need to build resilience faster and stronger. And in order to do so, we need to work on and reach all 17 SDGs together. So SDG 6 as well as SDG 5 and all the others in a holistic and well-integrated way. Building resilience is about giving people the possibilities, tools, and perspectives to withstand these enormous challenges that alarming climatic changes pose on their communities. Promoting access to and control over safe WASH helps people, especially the most vulnerable and invisible, to become resilient to the sudden, but also to the slow onset changes in our climate. This becomes extremely obvious in the case of disasters, but again, it's the sudden and the slow onset. For example, in Nepal, we did some research, and there the safeguarding of safe water and healthy sanitation facilities in poor areas at least enabled people, especially women and girls and elderly, to stay more healthy and to be safe from violence. So action and not words. Insecurities that accompany climate change, including insecurity of livelihood, that was underlined as well. So access to your economic welfare, to agriculture, etc. That can be better handled if WASH, as well as sexual and reproductive rights, are central to our efforts. Let me take you to the north of India, to the foothills of the Himalayas. It's 1988. With local counterparts, I was studying the impact of the introduction of new technologies on gender relations in the villages. In that context, it became clear that in order to strengthen the position of local women and to enhance their perspectives for the future, education of girls was crucial. So a lot of money and effort was invested by development organizations in promoting girls' access to school and to education. However, the illegal felling of forests for commercial uses meant that fodder for the animals, as well as energy and water sources for the families, became scarcer and scarcer. Families started to keep their children, it has been mentioned already, especially the girls, back from their schools at home, in order to support their mothers in running the household and keeping the agriculture system going. They walked many hours.
Irene,
Yeah.
sorry, you are in 5 minutes. Your time is almost running out. So
Yeah, I'm almost ready. Sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So the human-induced environmental degradation started to seriously hinder the goal of education for girls' education. The successful resistance, often led by women's groups to stop the felling of forests, such as part of the CHEPCO movement, directly contributed to giving girls room to get back to their schools again. So the organization of women around these issues themselves really meant that they could go to school. I could, as was mentioned already, I could talk for hours, but in order to enhance gender transformative WASH and climate change adaptation, there is really a need for fundamental changes in power relations and to involve men and boys. This has also to be done at institutional level. Leadership is important, and we can look at all the organizations around the world who raise environmental awareness, activism, and promote sustainable and just water footprints for all in everyday lives. This leadership is needed.
Wow, thank you, Irene. That was very, very interesting. And I can imagine that you want to talk much more. It's much interesting to tell. But I'm sorry, I have to cut you. So now I want to invite our colleague from Plan International, Jessica Cook, to tell something about what she's doing on the climate change and girls and education. So please, Jessica, the floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much for having me here at this important event. And I won't go into details on the links between WASH and climate change, as this has already been covered, but really rather highlight the gender injustice of climate change and the gender just climate solutions co-developed with youth that Plan International is taking. So we know that in times of climate crisis, impacts are not felt equally across countries or even within communities, with discriminatory social and gender norms, meaning that while girls and women are largely responsible for natural resource management and household tasks, they have very little say in how money is spent and are not included in decision-making at the household level, but also right up to national and global levels. This means that climate change adaptation approaches and policies are often gender blind and do not respond to specific needs and ideas of even half of the society. Adolescent girls are also removed from school, as has already been discussed, and forced to marry early, which can cause the early onset of key life transitions, including early pregnancy, that trap girls in a never-ending cycle of intergenerational poverty, vulnerability, and further marginalization. This exacerbates the gender divide, as unequal resources to quality education puts girls at further risk. And we know that by walking ever further distances to collect clean water puts them at risk of gender-based violence. And if girls are lucky enough to continue their education, they are often taught from a patriarchal, gender stereotype textbook, reinforcing these discriminatory norms and dictating future career paths. Girls are even often discouraged from pursuing STEM subjects or politics. So this is why Plan International developed a climate strategy that centers girls and young women's rights in the context of a changing climate. Since girls are severely impacted, as highlighted before, it is vital that they are part of the solution. And we call this gender just climate solutions. And this is exactly what Plan International aims to do through its work. In particular, the strategy explores how climate change impacts the sectors that we work in, but equally how climate action and justice approaches can support the outcomes of other sectors' work. In this way, climate action is a cross-cutting approach. Education, youth empowerment, and youth leadership were highlighted as key areas in which to advance climate justice. And these three areas create a roadmap or a narrative in supporting girls in having autonomy over their lives and engaging in climate policy processes. Alongside this strategy, we also developed a resilience framework focusing on some key pathways, for example, around risk knowledge, planning and access to basic services, natural resource management, social protection, and policy processes. And the idea is that these can be applied across the different sectors that we work in to strengthen the resilience of both girls and the services themselves to climate impact. The approach includes gender and age considerations in every aspect. For example, how to ensure early warning information is understood by and communicated to everyone in society. Another example is looking at how early warning systems are not only crucial for survival and for food and water security, but they can also be used to prepare sectors such as child protection or education for possible climate impacts and taking the necessary responses to protect assets and lives. This supports in continuous access to basic services and upholding rights. One key example of how our kind of climate strategy is coming to life is this year our approach has really focused on those three areas I mentioned earlier around education, youth empowerment, and youth engagement, and how these advance climate justice and mutually support outcomes for girls. So we created an advocacy initiative called Education Shifts Power that recognizes the role of a gender transformative education in advancing climate justice. And we're advocating for increased political and financial commitments through key international processes, such as the G7, the GPE Education Replenishment Summit, the UN General Assembly and COP26, and how each event can actually build on and leverage for commitments for girls. And the advocacy initiative is different because it's really been shaped by the voices and demands of youth activists, and we have co-developed the key messages with them, enabling young people to take a leading role in improving climate education and guide our work. So why the focus on education? Currently, over 20 million secondary school-age girls are at risk of never returning to school after COVID-19. And estimates also suggest that in 2021 alone, climate-related events will prevent at least 4 million girls in low and lower middle-income countries from completing their education. And this will further entrench the gender gaps in education that we've seen and undermine girls' ability to adapt to climate impact. But we know that education can be transformative. It can increase adaptive capacities, pro-environmental behaviours, sustainable natural resource management, and leadership in decisions that most affect them. To support this initiative, we also conducted a survey of young people's experiences of and recommendations for climate education and youth leadership, and enable them to raise these recommendations directly with ministries of education and environment. The survey actually found that 1 in 5 young people rated their climate education as poor or very poor. And so some of our work at Plan International is trying to fill this gap. And we're currently developing a new youth leadership and climate policy workbook to support their engagement in climate decision making. We know that climate education tends to focus on science and impact and doesn't include things like adaptation, resilience, and policy processes. So we're also advocating governments to engage girls in national climate policy processes like the nationally determined contributions or the national adaptation plans to ensure the decisions on their futures include them. At the international level, we're calling on governments to include girls in official delegations for this year's COP26 and support them in observing negotiations and accessing information. And this includes compensating them for their expenses. The ultimate aim of this initiative is for girls to have a seat at the climate decision-making table that they rightly deserve through an improved education. I will end now with a quote from a 24-year-old climate activist, Renata from Brazil. If you ever question why we need girls' education for climate action, just remember that the outcome of climate negotiations can only be half as good with only half of the population on the ground. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, Jess. That's good to hear also the perspective from the importance of education for girls to combat climate change and to make them more resilient. Now we are going to present a video where Fisea Atali from Plan Ethiopia team is also telling what is their experience. It's a video because the connection with Ethiopia normally is very unreliable. And after when Fisea has finished, then there is a small short videos on some girls from Uganda and the Pacific telling what are their challenges because of water scarcity. So I want to invite Margot to start the video and keep on putting questions in the chat box, please. So now, Margot.
Hello, my name is Fisea Atali, working for Plan International Ethiopia. I'm presenting you two big gender-transformative and climate change WASH programs, which are funded by Embassy of the Kingdom of Netherlands. These are Healthy Village and WASH SDG programs. The programs are being implemented in Sequota Declaration districts. At this World Week, Water Week event, I'm presenting you the contribution of these two programs in relation to climate change and gender equality. The climate change affects program areas, especially in Sequota Declaration districts. As a result of this, there is less rainfall in the implementation areas. This causes reduction of water tables, drying of water schemes. As a result of drying of water schemes are often left abandoned, which means, again, shortage of water. Secondly, we have also flood. Due to flooding, the communities where we implement projects, they have suffered because of the damage of latrines, and these latrines also cause environmental pollution. As a result of environmental pollution, communities are also encouraged to practice open defecation. The other impact of climate is also the spread of pests and locusts. Last year, for instance, in the Sakota Declaration districts, there had been a big damage caused by locusts, which destroyed the crops of the farmers. So the impact of climate change on waterways mainly affects girls and women, because girls and women have to go far places to fetch water. This means, again, they are being exposed for rapes. Especially girls are also forced to leave classes, or they have poor school attendance and also poor performance. Therefore, the program works in improving quality of water schemes and integrated water resource management. To address gender inequality in WASH and to create climate resilient communities in the program areas, the program employs WASH monitoring tool, multi-use water system, climate resilient WASH schemes, and use of solar power approach. Therefore, through this approach, the program improves the learning environment of girls, empowers women and girls, promote shared WASH workload in the family. Shared workload allows women to engage in diversified income-generating activities, especially through multiple-use systems. Multiple-use systems allows women to grow homestead crops or gardens. And this is useful for women because homestead gardens are mainly controlled by women. Thank you very much.
My name is Gramia Gloria Paula from Mangaba Primary School in Nakuru Sub-County in Nebi District in Uganda. Because of lack of rain, due to much tree cutting, getting water for domestic use is difficult because you have to walk a long distance and wait for long at a borehole. This has made managing my period also difficult due to less water available. I want to encourage everyone to plant trees to reduce the drought, just like we are doing in our school. I'm happy with the WASH program for training us on how to protect our environment. Thank you.
My name is Gramia Sliva from Mangawa Primary School in Nakuru Sub-County in Nebi District in Uganda. Our sub-county is known for drought, and this has affected us in many ways. There is a lack of water for domestic use. Managing my period is also very difficult. There is also a hunger in most communities. This is because of too much cutting of trees in my sub-county. My serious thanks goes to WASH program for teaching us how to manage our environment by planting more trees. Thanks.
One impact of climate change that has really affected our school is the longer period of dry season, which leads to water shortage and contributes to students being absent from school.
My name is Elsie Masahue. My role is I am the WASH Club President of Tukihing Primary School. As a female student, I am experiencing lack of water to practice hand washing and menstrual hygiene practices because water tanks are not enough. There must be proper toilets, water supplied, and changing room especially for girls. One example of an action that the community has taken out of the project is hand washing, but they are not using it because there is not enough water supply. My message to the participant is to keep on requesting for you to continuously find ways to provide water supply to me as a female when I am having my menstrual period in school. Thank you.
My message to the participants is to continue to help school to provide climate resilient water system, safe toilets, and hygiene facilities to contribute to the quality education for our children. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, I hope you liked the video, and what I liked is also to hear from girls from the field, from the communities where we are working, that there are really, what is really their already day-to-day problem, and the water scarcity. That is, yeah, that is really something they're already facing and they have to cope with. So that is really already a big challenge for them. What I now would like to do is start the panel discussion. So I would like to ask the people in the panel to open their camera. And that is Masha Singeling, Irene Dunkelman, Jessica Cook, and Garance Reus. And we have already some questions in the chat box. I'm not sure, Margot, if you can ask those questions or do I have to do this? I'm not sure if I saw all the questions.
Yes, I have. I can start with sharing one question. Is that okay?
Yes.
A question that came in from Jose /Doyle like 20 minutes ago. And her question is, how have you adapted your tools, that is gender analysis tools, accommodating a shift of focus towards climate change, or do the issues come to the fore automatically in your community discussions? And I think this question was asked to the first presenter, which is Irene. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jose.
It's Masha.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but I think everybody feel free to take this one up. Well, it's a very good question, Jose. I think you don't, well, the gender analysis is something you need to do in all your programs, especially if it's, and also you have to introduce that within your climate resilience and vulnerability assessments as well. So it shouldn't be, actually it shouldn't be two separate analysis, it should be one, because they are very much interlinked and you have to see what are the climate challenges for women and girls, or for other people with disability or other marginalized groups. So I think they should be much more intertwined. I think that's the adaptation that could be made. Let me see. So it does, I don't think it comes automatically. And it's a pity that FSA isn't online, so you can also explain how they do this in the discussions in the field, because I think whenever you have discussions on climate, you should have that gender lens on. So I don't think it comes automatically, but it should become an automatic reaction in how you work. So yeah, but it's not like it's, well, I think the people on the ground and government staff need to be trained how to make this automatic. But Irene, maybe you have something to add to that, or Jessica.
If I may, thank you very much, Masha. That's already very important, that environmental assessments and gender analysis should be intertwined and should be linked to each other. But what is also very important is to do, for example, the mapping of problems people face with the communities themselves. And for that, we often use focus group discussions, so that the analysis is made based on people's own experiences and needs. The mapping, the real mapping, going outside with groups of women and men separately or mixed, that's also a very important possibility to get a good picture of how women and men often are facing, women of different backgrounds, men of different backgrounds are facing diverse issues and problems in their lives. And to be aware of those is essential to make the right decisions.
Thank you, Irene. Very useful contribution. Someone else, or shall we go to the next question? Or someone else wants to react? Jessica? No? Okay.
I have a second question that came in, Gerdien.
Yeah, good.
Which is really a key question, a very challenging one, which comes from Liza de Bevec. And she says, given that a sustainable transformative change takes a long time, more than the usual duration of project funding, how do you plan for M&E for this to work? How do you define your theory of change and ensure sustainability long-term change, given the challenge of short-term funding that we all face in the context of our work? Who wants to address that question, this key question?
Yeah, it's a very good question, Liza. And I think this is a question that is also needs to be addressed back to donors.
Mm-hmm.
And I know donors are also working and having discussions on this, because, well, any sustainable change takes long, and gender transformation takes generations sometimes. So yeah, that's a discussion we are having with donors, to have a longer view. But I mean, also, well, how plan works is we work in an area for at least 10 years on different projects from different funding streams. So that means that your activities can even continue with other donor funding as well. And I think that's something from a plan perspective we can work on. And on the other side, you work with donors to enhance their long-term vision and long-term funding. So I think these are two different ways how we can ensure continuous funding. But another one is, of course, you work with governments. We work with the local systems which are there, which are not leaving when funding is leaving. And I think it's important that they continue, that this is not a planned activity. It becomes a government activity. And that's why we do a lot of training. We work with governments. All the things we implement, we do together with governments and local leaders, natural leaders. So the change continues even when the funding doesn't.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, someone else wants to react on this?
Jessica?
Yeah, so I definitely agree with Marcia. I mean, the first one is definitely advocating donors, and certainly through the kind of resilience strengthening projects and donors that we have for that. And you know, we've been told time and again that 3 years is not enough to strengthen resilience to climate change. So that, you know, enforces us and enables us to go to governments and donors and say that we need longer term funding for this. But we also need flexibility. We can't go into communities and just say what we think is needed. We need to be having these consultations beforehand, and they need to be driving the actual changes and transformations that they want to see themselves. The second one is really that Plan International takes a program and influence approach. So while, yes, we do a lot of work in actual programming activities, we also need to do influencing and constantly kind of push donors, but also governments and systems to strengthen resilience, to include climate adaptation, etc. And that's certainly what we do in the education system, is really look at the curriculum about the actual system and the resilience of the system, about the resilience of the school, and really support governments to be able to make those concrete changes as well. So that we can't be reliant on NGOs and project cycles. We need to be looking at the wider systems in which we operate. And then the third one, is just around kind of empowering communities, and particularly girls, to take forward the changes themselves. And if they're empowered to be able to do this, then hopefully we will see the longer term sustainable development and transformations that that they want to see and that they have come up with. So definitely including their ideas in our advocacy towards governments, I think can create that longer term sustainable change as well. Thanks.
Thank you, Jessica.
Can I quickly add?
Yeah.
Building on what has been said, I think we are not only doing this kind of work as donors or as development organizations. There's already a lot happening on the ground, and people have been used to build their resilience throughout their whole livelihood and their whole life. So building on that and strengthening what is already there. And on the other hand, institutional changes in the institutions in a country or in a district or local community. We did that in Bhutan. We very much focused on bringing the voices of the local people together with that of the government and looking into what can we change in those institutions dealing with these issues in future.
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so Gerlien, looking at
Yeah, Garance, you want to say something?
Yeah, just to build on what was said earlier around donors and the long-term outlook, I'd like to encourage any donor on the that has joined us today to indeed consider a more longer-term approach. And I'd like to invite them to look to inspiration, for instance, to the Ford Foundation in the US, who has really grasped the idea of a more flexible approach, a much longer-term approach, much more use of non-restricted funds, so that we can indeed adapt to these to the changing environment. And I think I find encouraging signs also talking to donors and the ministry in the Netherlands, that there is an understanding that these things cost much more time and that there's a need to step over, the short-term restraints such as, parliamentary cycles, etc. But there are great examples around the world of donors really starting to understand that you need, 5 years is great, but 20 years is a lot wiser. So thank you to all donors who are starting to grasp that we need a really long-term approach for this.
Okay, thank you for this contribution. It's an important addition. Margot, are there more questions on the
Yes, I have still 2 questions, and I propose I will present them at the same time, also looking at the time. We still have 30 minutes left, so I will just raise those 2 questions, and the participants can see how to address them. So the first one is from Annie Msosa. She's asking, what would you say is your track record on uptake of your interventions by government? This appears to be a major issue with governments in low-income countries where interventions tend to stop with projects. What lessons do you have to share on that, and what are you doing differently? That was the first one. And the second one is from Tamene Shaka, who is saying, what main results have you got from the application of the tool? How the application of the tool looks like in the COVID-19 pandemic? So Gerlien, look back to you. I don't know what question would you like to address first?
Well, let's first answer the main results from the application of the tool. And in the COVID pandemic, I'm not sure. Maybe Margot, you can answer it because you worked quite a lot with the gender WASH monitoring tool.
Yeah, because my question was also because we have been discussing on several tools. Okay, I think that I can do that, but I would like to invite the panelists to really think of the last question, which is really, or the longer question, which is really about how governments took up, especially the one in low income countries. But maybe the one on the application of the tool as Plan International, and especially within the WASH SDG program. We have been working with the gender and WASH monitoring tool for now 4 years. And what we can see is that it has been really a learning process, not only for the program teams, but also for the local governments. And what we have been doing, the tool is basically taking place various moments per year. It can be once a year, it can be twice a year. And what we do is, well, it's we have FSEA, I think, well, not on board, but we really addressed.
I am bored. Margot.
You're there.
Oh, you're there. So I don't know, maybe looking because
No,
I think
surprise.
yeah, this is about the gender and WASH monitoring tool. Maybe you can say in just a few words what has been the added value, because you have been the one practicing it. We were together in a training 4 years ago. What has been the key impact of using this gender transformative WASH tool?
Thank you, Margot. Actually, I heard this question. Sorry for being late to join the session.
No problem. You're here.
Yes, this gender and WASH monitoring tool is very important, and we started it at the beginning of the project implementation. And one of the important things this tool helps us to is that to really identify the community level of work load variation between men and women. You see, when we analyze this tool, one, we are able to understand really the loads of women and also the loads of men. The second thing is it also helped us to help men understand the workload of women. And even during our sessions, men said we have not realized till today how much our women have been overloaded. And that helped us to convince men to share the workload at household level, especially with regard to WASH. So that is one important thing, which means it clearly helped us to convince men that they should help women. One. The second thing is, probably the question is related also to COVID-19. This global pandemic, as it's a global problem, it has also hindered us from implementing the tool continuously. We have been planning to implement in 11 communities, but we were not able to reach all because we stopped in the middle of the process. Because as Margot highlighted, we have to do it at least biannually, twice in a year, so that we can understand the progress. So in the middle of the process, we interrupted checking the progress being made by the tool. And yet, recently we realized from the media that there is some improvements that men are supporting women. And yet, we have not yet worked hard in the middle of the process of the program implementation.
Yeah. Visea, I'm very sorry to interrupt you, but also taking into account the time, just thanking you so much for your explanation and coming back again to the question on the tool, because I was there a few years ago with you, Visea, doing this training, and it was so amazing to see. And I think that is also so important of the tool. It divides groups, either men and women, into different ages categories, and that allows for people to speak out. A young woman will say other things when she is only with young girls than when she is with her grandmother. And I think that is also really nice of the tool. And other than that, it allows the discussion, the mutual understanding, the exchange, and this in the end leads to mutual understanding, which leads to change of behavior. And I think that is one thing we have seen so far of the tool, coming back to the same communities. I'm going back to Gerdien because of the last question. I think it was a very good question, but also looking at the time, you still have 6 minutes left. So in 6 minutes, we have still 2 minutes before we will be kicked out of this meeting.
Yeah, I know we have 3 minutes for the last question. What would you say is your track record on, that was the question, van Annie, yeah, uptake of your interventions by government? This appears to be a major issue with governments in low-income countries where we're working, where interventions tend to stop with projects. What lessons do you have to share on that, and why are you doing differently? And what are you doing differently?
Maybe Visea, because he works already a very long time with the national government.
Yeah.
He knows the ropes.
Yeah, Visea, maybe you can answer.
Well, it's a very difficult question, actually.
Okay.
Well, I think the track record, well, I think, Masha, we have been working with Netherlands for a long time, with Pan-African charities. If you remember, we have reached so many communities in helping them to achieve ODF status. And since then, we are actually, thanks to Netherlands government, working together with Netherlands, and we are progressing well. Now the question is, what's the track record? What's the track record? Well, for me, one of the track record I would say is, one, we have been able to create strong partnership between the donor and the government, and also the country office. We have very positive understanding by the national government and also especially the regional government, where we are implementing this NLNO project. So when we go to the regional government, well, you are coming well, where you are good partners, and we are happy to work with you. That's what they usually say. So in this case, we have one good track record. The second thing is with regard to the achievements. You know, these low-income countries that have got different challenges they are facing at different times. When they have budget shortage, for example, they fail to continue the achievements of the programs. That's what the problem we are facing. The programs end. When programs end, we expect as governments to take up and continue sustain the achievements already realized at the community level. That's the challenge. That's what we are facing. For example, communities we have declared as audit during Pan-African CLTs 5 or 6 years back, I think, Masha, they slipped back, you see. They slipped back, and still we are working on that, you see. So it requires that, as we have been citing, discussing before 10 minutes, that long-standing support, see, long-standing support maybe helpful to help local governments by themselves achieve behavioral change and also continue doing it. And so,
thank you. So wrap up, please, Vissa.
Yes.
Visea, thank you so much. We really have to cut down due to the time. We only have 3 minutes left. So back to Gerdien for the takeaway.
Yes, thank you, Visea. It was very interesting that you could add this. Now we're coming to an end. I want to thank all the speakers, all the participants. And I have some takeaway messages, although it's not covering all the messages we got because it was so much and so interesting. But the main messages I got from it, at least, was that climate change is the biggest intergenerational challenge we are facing right now. The climate crisis is also a water crisis, and since women and girls are bearing the greatest burden of the WASH work, they are most affected by the consequences of climate change. There is a gap in existing approach to climate change resilience. The session showed the importance of working with and empowering young girls in WASH activities and decision-making, and so strengthen resilience in the local community. What we also see is that gender-transformative and climate-smart WASH solutions can help increase climate change and disaster resilience, while also empowering girls and women. And working with environmental organizations will make it possible to focus also on the landscape or catchment area of the program. It's the pre-WASH, what Masha already mentioned, the integrated water resource management and governance. And what I really liked, what Irene was mentioning, we need action and not words. So I want to end by using these words from Irene. So thank you all, and till next year, I hope. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much,
everybody.
Yeah.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Everyone for joining.
Keep
We will continue the discussion. This is not the end. We are just running out of time. So
Absolutely.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.